Hey, today we're talking about the financial criteria to get legal residency in Mexico in 2024. You don't want to watch this whole video? You want to get right to the deets? Well, if you know anything about the requirements in 2023, I'm here to tell you that the amount of money you need to have saved or invested for people who are applying using US dollars, using assets or income in US dollars, has functionally increased by a whopping 34%. Interested? Hang around, I'll tell you more. If this feels like the kind of information you need in your life right now, go ahead and subscribe to this channel so you can be notified about the next video in this series. Hi, my name is Rashida Dow, and I got legal residence in Mexico in 2021. I got my temporary residency there for 1 year, and since then I've renewed for 3 more years. The next step in my process is to get permanent residency in 2025, so I'm always keeping my eye out to see what's going on with these trends. All the numbers I'm going to tell you today are for individuals applying alone. If you're applying with a family, a child, a spouse, I'm going to make a separate video to give you more details about what you need to know. All of the numbers, the processes, the facts that I share with you here today are based on information that is created by the Mexican government. They create the policies for all of what we're talking about, but for most of what we're discussing here, the policies are going to be implemented in cities outside of Mexico by employees in the local city. What that means is that there's going to be a human, an individual, a person in Boston or in LA, in New Orleans, who is going to be the person to decide whether your application gets approved or not. They're going to be the person to decide the criteria that they're applying to your application. Now, I'm not saying everyone is using different criteria in an individual office. I'm saying that different offices are going to be doing different things at the same time. So one of the things I recommend to people I talk to is to make sure that you speak to the people at the embassy you're planning on going to make sure that your application as it stands is something they're going to approve, especially if you think you're kind of on the borderline. One thing I don't want you to do is to try to go to a consulate, which is where the application process happens. I don't want you to go to a consulate and then try to finesse somebody. There's not a lot of finessing in this system. For the most part, your documents need to show exactly what the person is looking for, or you're going to be declined. To add a little bit more color here, individual consulates kind of act like little kingdoms, right? And the individual employee in the consulate is kind of a king. They can rubber stamp your application and say yes, they can say no. And once they make that decision, there's no one to appeal it to, right? So if that person's having a bad day, then you might be having a bad day. This isn't to say that you shouldn't go through with the process. I applied in Miami, and the person I dealt with was either a bad person or he was having a bad day. I'll never know, but I still got approved. He just created a lot of hoops for me to jump through that I hadn't heard of other people experiencing. So be prepared for the things that you experience in the city you go to, in the consulate you visit. Be prepared for that experience to not match exactly what I'm saying here, and for the numbers to perhaps be different, but that's just how the process works when you're trying to get residency in Mexico. In this video, I'll be talking to you about getting residency through economic solvency. There are other ways to get residency, but we're going to focus on economic solvency in this video. There are multiple different ways to qualify by using economic solvency. And what economic solvency basically means is that you are convincing the Mexican government that you have enough money either coming in monthly in income or invested or saved, that when you come to Mexico, you won't be a burden on the country. You can support yourself fully, and they may never have to see you, right? Like, you're not going to be going to the government to ask for anything. You are fully solvent. You are good financially. That's what you need to prove. And I'm going to tell you right now the numbers you need in order to prove that. There are basically 4 different ways that you can prove economic solvency. First is with your monthly income. Second is with savings or investments. Third is with property, real property, so a home, real estate owned within Mexico. And fourth on the list is an investment in a Mexican company. We're going to talk about those 4 today and which ones are trickier than others. Please listen all the way to the end because I don't want you doing the wrong thing, and there are some details you need to know. One thing you need to know is that you have to qualify completely under one of those 4 ways. You can't mix and match. You can't meet half of the criteria for monthly income and then half of the criteria for savings or investments and hope you can match those together. That doesn't work. You need to fully meet the requirements under one of those criteria. Another important note is that all financial statements relating to these investments, income, whatever, everything must be in the name of the applicant. Account statements must be in your name, can get a little tricky. If there's anything here that feels like it's confusing or you might be on the fence, I recommend speaking to an immigration facilitator who can help make this process easier for you. You really want to get information from people who are actively working in this process, right? So people who are talking to immigration every day, especially in the specific offices that you might go to, so that you know you're getting the best information, right? I can't answer every question for everybody and tell you every situation in this video. You're gonna have to do some legwork yourself if you feel like you might be on the fence. The first thing you need to know is that the calculations to figure out how much money you need to have saved or invested is a multiplier of the Mexican minimum daily wage. So the minimum daily wage for most of a country, there's a separate region that is excluded in the north, but we're not talking about that. It's the minimum daily wage for most of the country. The amount you need in income or investments is a multiplier of that. The multiplier does not change. It has not changed in a really long time. Maybe it changed a long time ago, but now it does not change. It has not changed. What does change is the minimum wage in Mexico. For the past, I want to say 4 years, it's gone up about 20% every year. That is a significant number. That is a significant number. In fact, let me look at my notes real quick and tell you how much it's gone up. 2017, 9%, 2018, 10%, 2019, 16%, 2020, 20%, 2021, 15%, 2022, 23%, 2023, 20%, and 2024, 20%. What that means is if you're watching this video in 2024 and you are borderline, it is time to apply because next year it might go up by 20% as well, and you won't be on the border anymore, right? So the more you wait to get this done, the greater chance minimum wage is going to increase by amount that makes the multiplier untenable for you, right? So if you want this, I want you to have it. So let's talk about how to make this happen. Now, this might be the part where you're asking me the question, which is, Rashida, in the beginning of this video, you said the amount went up functionally by 34%, but here you're saying it's a multiplier, the multiplier doesn't change, and the minimum daily wage went up by 20%. So how do we get from 20 to 34%? All right, I'm gonna tell you. Okay, what happened is that the exchange rate between the dollar and the peso has shifted so dramatically that the numbers here that I'm going to read you are significantly higher than the 20% we would have expected if the exchange rate stayed the same. So the peso is stronger compared to the dollar in 2024 than it was in 2023. In looking at this information in 2023, we could look at numbers. The peso was about 20 pesos to $1 for a long time. Beginning of 2023, we could comfortably say 19 pesos to $1. 2024, we're looking at 17 pesos to $1. And that really has impacted the way you're going to be treated. If you're showing proof in dollars, it really impacted that. So when you go to consulates, they're going to be looking at significantly higher numbers. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that each consulate is going to use a different exchange rate. So I'm going to give you numbers in pesos, and I'm also going to give you numbers in dollars. But keep in mind that if the consulate in Boise, is there a consulate in Boise? I don't know. The consulate in Boise uses one number one exchange rate, and the consulate in Washington, D.C. uses a different exchange rate, you're going to be expected to have a different amount of US dollars invested or earning an income each month based on which consulate you go to. I don't know if they tell you their exchange rate they're using ahead of time. You might be able to ask and you might get an answer. Every place is going to treat you differently. All right, let's go. First, we're going to start with the amount of money you need to have as income each month in order to get approved for temporary or permanent residency. And then I'm going to tell you some things you need to know when you're applying with monthly income so that you do not end up upset in the consulate like, where did the surprise come from? I'm trying to tell you all the surprises before you get to your appointment, all right? For temporary and permanent residency, for monthly income, the rule is that you need to provide 6 months of pay stubs proving that you've met the income threshold, right? The after tax, this income threshold is after tax. So you need 6 months of statements proving it. Now, some consulates are going to ask for 12 months, which is why I say contact the consulate ahead of time and make sure you understand all of their requirements. Don't end up being surprised. In order to meet the requirements for temporary residency in Mexico in 2024, you need to have a monthly income that is the equivalent of 74,679 pesos each month. Now, right now, using an exchange rate of 19 pesos per dollar, that comes out to about $4,393. Now, your results may vary. You may go to a place that is using a 16-to-1 exchange rate. You may go to a place that's using a 20-to-1 exchange rate, which is why I'm saying please pay attention to the peso amount. And before you go, do the most recent calculation because that's the closest you're going to get if the consulate doesn't disclose what their exchange rate is. You with me? Okay, let's move on to permanent residency. For permanent residency, the amount of pesos equivalent you need to have each month in income is $124,465,000. That equates to $7,321 US dollars today, using 19-to-1. Now, I just gave you the number for permanent residency. Here's what you need to know. That equivalent of $7,321, they want that to be coming as Social Security or a pension. If you are getting that as a monthly paycheck, you're unlikely to get permanent residency. They want permanent residency. The consulates in the past few years have really wanted permanent residency to go to people who are retired. And the idea is that if you're getting a paycheck, you're not retired, so you can't be a permanent resident. Once again, I am not saying that this is the way it should be. I'm not saying this is fair. I'm not saying I like it. I'm saying this is probably what you're going to experience when you go to the consulate. All right, here are a couple of challenges I want you to know about getting residency through Economic Solvency using your monthly income as proof. There are 3 things you need to know. As a whole, the consulates ask for pay stubs, not tax returns. So if you own your own business and you are not paying yourself through a payment plan provider that leaves you with pay stubs, if your company name is your exact name, paying yourself, the employee in the consulate might have a hard time approving you. Your money is valid, your money is good, but it doesn't hit that check mark on the page that they're looking for. And the employees in these consulates are unlikely to waver from what is on the checklist, right? They are looking for pay stubs. If you don't have pay stubs, you may have a hard time proving income. You're going to want to talk to the consulate ahead of time. Call, some of them you can call, you can write emails, you can ask. There are avenues to ask your questions. They might not always answer the phone and they might not always return your emails, but one of the consulates out there will. You just may have to try a little bit. And before we go any further, consulate shopping from one place to the next works sometimes it doesn't. If you're in certain areas, you have to go to certain consulates. I wish you the best. All right. Another challenge that comes up occasionally is that some of the consulates will ask you for a letter from your employer that states that you will be employed by that employer for the entire length of your visa in Mexico. Now, y'all, it's hilarious to me when this happens. It's not funny, but it's funny. When this happens in consulates that are based in America, because everyone living in America knows that no employer is going to write you a letter saying, yes, I guarantee that I'm going to be employing this person for 4 years. Who's doing that? Nobody's doing that, right? Like what? In our at-will country, nobody's doing that. But it is something that some of the consulates have asked for, and I want you to be aware of, so that you are not surprised when you go in there. I'm not saying you need to get a letter. I'm saying you need to make sure with the consulate you plan on going to, ask them what their requirements are ahead of time. If they say that and you know you can't get a letter, perhaps you look for a different consulate to apply at. This third thing isn't really income related, but I have seen it for people who are applying through this method. They're applying through Economic Solvency using monthly pay stubs or using monthly pay. One of the things that some of the consulates have been asking for is proof of a year-long lease. I'm laughing because it's so ridiculous. Proof of a year-long lease or ownership of property in Mexico. Pause. Do not jump to ownership of property in Mexico as the way to go. There are some caveats there as well. But the idea of having a year-long lease before you're even approved to live legally in a country, like full-time, is just wild, right? Some of the consulates are creating a lot of challenges for people who want to apply. And like I said, I don't have the list. I know that Dallas has recently asked people for leases. I know that Boston and some other consulates have asked people for letters guaranteeing employment, but there are a lot of consulates out there. I can't tell you what everyone is doing. Communicate with them. If you're in groups of people who are applying for residency in Mexico, tell them which consulate you're going to and ask them what they were asked for if they've gone in the past month. If it's more than like 1, 2, 3 months, don't rely on that information. It can change at any time. It's not a terrible process, but it's not always intuitive, and it does take some maneuvering around. All right, those are the caveats I wanted you to know about applying with monthly income. And now we're moving on to investments and savings. That is the second thing on the list. If you're using the amount of your investments or savings to apply, investments or savings like in the stock market, savings in a bank, etc., high yield savings account, whatever. We're not talking about investments in companies or properties right now. These are like liquid-ish that we're talking about, right? Liquidy. You can add, for this category, you can add different accounts together. So if you have half in an IRA and half in a high yield savings account, why do you have that much money in a high yield savings account? But if you do, you can apply with those two together, but you can't grab something from another category. Okay? All right. For temporary residency, the amount of money they expect to see you have invested this year is in Mexican pesos, 1,244,650 pesos. In US dollars, the equivalent is $73,215. That is not a little bit of money. It is not a little bit. But with the exchange rate, like I said, and with the 20% jump in minimum wage, it really jumped from last year. All right. For permanent residency, the amount is 4,978,800 pesos, or the equivalent right now, using a 19-to-1 exchange rate, is $292,859. Like I said, the consulates aren't going to get off of they're checking a list, right? They're probably, and that's not to say that like they're robots or they're not smart and they can't handle other things. They are given requirements right? By the head office here in Mexico, by immigration authorities. And so they typically stick to what the immigration authorities say. I say typically because I've never heard anyone vary in a way that's helpful. I've only heard them vary by making you jump through more hoops. Now, so they're not going to accept other types of investments that aren't laid out specifically in the policies. Like they're not going to accept cryptocurrency as an investment. It's just not going to happen. Not in 2024. Same thing for metals. You own a lot of gold? Cool. Sell it, put it in an investment account. Otherwise, they don't care. Let's talk about getting residency in Mexico using the value of a home, real property that you own in Mexico. In Mexico. The property must be in Mexico, not New Mexico. Not old Mexico before it was California, right? And Texas, not in current day Mexico. Let's talk about it. All right, first, I'm just going to give you the number and then we're going to run through some stuff. The numbers and then the rules. Okay, so the property must be valued at a minimum of 9,957,000 pesos, and that right now is the equivalent of $586. Say you own the property that is the equivalent of $586,000 in US dollars. The property must be in Mexico. I have said that. I hope you have heard it. Current day Mexico, it must be here. A couple other things that you need to know about the property. It must be free of any liens. So you can't have any mortgages, no debts, no nothing. $586,000 of property that is free and clear, that is in your name. Some people in Mexico buy properties in trust, like it's in a bank's name, but you really own it. It has to be in your name. And you must have a valuation that shows what the property is worth, and it must meet the minimum amount. Now, the reason I'm very, very hesitant about this is that not all consulates will accept property ownership as proof of economic solvency. I want to repeat that again so you hear it. Don't go out and buy a property in Mexico as your way of proving economic solvency, because many consulates will not accept it as proof, even though it's right there in the official government policies. You're talking to Sally, who just got back from lunch, and she's in a bad mood because her kid called her and he acting up in school. And she don't like real estate. And so now what are you going to do? Right? You just bought something and you can't get it approved. And I want to be clear again, there's no going over Sally's head. She tells you what she tells you and that's it. God bless it. Right? Like that's where we are. I've told you that not all consulates accept real property as proof of economic solvency. The other thing to know is that consulates can change their policy at any time. So suppose you know that San Francisco accepts it in January 2024, and it takes you 6 months to buy a property. It's now June 2024. San Francisco might not accept it anymore. And now you've tied up your money in property in Mexico. That's why I really think that having liquid investments or income is a much safer way to go. The consulates don't say no to that. They might make you jump through more hoops, but if you have investments in documents in forms that they're expecting to see, you're in a much better position. To add on to the list I had before, when you have property, it has to be residential property. It can't be commercial property in Mexico. It must be residential property in your name with all the other criteria that you use to apply. All those hoops. Last on the list of ways that you can prove economic solvency is by investing in a Mexican company. In order to prove economic solvency through investment in a company, you have to invest at least 4,978,600 pesos. The equivalent of that is $293,000. So it's less than what you need to have in real estate, but it's trickier. That's why it's last on the list. You have to invest in a specific way. You can't just, give your cousin who has a company some money. Like there's rules you have to follow in order for your investment to count. So if you want to do this, I really recommend talking to someone, perhaps a lawyer, plug for the lawyers, perhaps a lawyer who specializes in helping people get residency through this manner. This is not something I suggest you do on your own. If you have the right amount, if you meet the criteria clearly for monthly income or investments, for the most part, I think this is a process you can do on your own, unless you think there's something tricky going on. But for real estate and for investments, you definitely want to speak to an expert so you're not winging this. So you're not investing and then realizing your investment doesn't count. All right, to wrap this up, here's what you really need to know. The minimum daily wage, if it is used to calculate all of the numbers you need to meet in order to get legal residency in Mexico, has gone up by 20% this year. Second thing you need to remember, at the same time, the dollar isn't as strong versus the peso as it was last year. So the amount of money you need to have in US dollars, not in pesos, but in US dollars, is about 34% higher than it was last year. Number 3, each consulate can use their own numbers, their own exchange rate. So the amount they ask for may vary from consulate to consulate. If you feel like you're borderline, it may be time to do a little consulate shopping. And number 4, the important part of consulate shopping is contacting them ahead of time and asking them what their requirements are. If you want to do temporary residency by savings, what is the amount of money they're looking for? What are their other requirements? Can you get the list? Can you get it in writing? Can they email it to you? Because if you write it down, you might forget it, right? Like get it in writing if you can't. Not that you're going to hold them to it, but at least you will have something from them saying, this is what you told me you asked for. They probably won't care if that's not what they, if they send that to you on a Monday and on a Wednesday they want something else, they may not care, but someone might have a heart. Next, the chance of the minimum wage going up by 20% next year is high. It's gone up by about 20% in the past 4 or 5 years. What will the exchange rate be doing? Who knows? Can't call it. I can call that the minimum wage is going to go up. I can't call what the exchange rate is going to be doing. So if you want to apply for residency in Mexico, you are making it harder for yourself if you keep putting it off. If you found this video helpful, please subscribe and turn on notifications. I'm going to be going through a lot more videos about this process, about the immigration process, about getting legal residency in Mexico. So if this is of interest to you, come on down. Take a seat, take your shoes off, hang out. And while you're here, go ahead and say nice things to me in the comments. I really like that. All right, I'll see you next time. Bye.